Much respect, fam. I just want to do minutes with the minister recording. I want to come out and talk about this issue of wokeism versus consciousness, truthfully, versus being conscious. Are you conscious or are you woke? Because we have a very serious conflict going on in the conscious community. Because, I'm really shocked the other day. I actually used to think of the word woke as having a relationship to awakening, but I looked in the Oxford Dictionary and discovered that this idea of woke is actually being created now into a whole social construct. Because when we're dealing with wokeism and how the fact, like I said, I was thinking in the context of the word being awakened and awoke. But I looked in the dictionary and discovered that this word woke now is actually, it's more of a modern urban word, which is like based on the concept of awakening and being awoke, essentially. And what the dictionary explained, it was like Oxford reference that I was able to get in Google from the Oxford Dictionary, was that woke is an adjective, actually, that it depicts an individual who has become alert to injustice in society, you see, especially racism. And that's where we've actually seen the idea of wokeism being employed the most, interestingly, is in the manipulation of racial identity politics, particularly in a Western society, which Africans being dominated in imperialism. We are a part of that whole rhetoric and manipulation of the psychology of the dominant melanated man, because the media of the West is not controlled by the black man. You see, it's not controlled by the black woman. It's controlled by individuals who have actually had the manifest destiny perpetrated by their ancestors, such that they're benefiting from it today. So they don't have to go out of their way to perpetuate it. You see, it, the state of their society. That's why we talk about imperialism. And racism is something that, I'll be honest, is true. Yes, human beings by appearance will always look at each other and differentiate. But what we have today was never enshrined into the moral code of society. You see, it wasn't a social institution. It wasn't a mental construct until the Roman Catholic Church actually created documents and then initiated protocols where priests went out and preached a particular doctrine using the gospel of Jesus Christ, however you want to put it, to give the impression to Europeans first, to get them to morally destroy that context that these are human beings. You see it. All of this was only made possible because the Bible and Christianity was used. That the church used passages like Genesis chapter 9 following into chapter 10, where they bring up this whole story about this man called Noah, which I say you trace history, you'll read about floods, because a lot of early civilizations lived along rivers. The flood is something that harmonized even with the moon, and you had seasonal flooding and things like that. So they wrote about these things in their mythologies, severely dramatized. Noah now, and the whole presentation comes with a lot of relationship to the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a document written under the Babylonian culture and civilization just a couple hundred years before. So I say you start to read this belief system that they created, that an individual had 3 sons, and one of them saw him naked while he was drunk, so he cursed the grandson of that individual, and then they interpreted that because that individual Canaan, you see, that Noah cursed Canaan because Ham, his son, saw him naked, so he cursed his grandson, you see, the son of Ham. And then they said that because he cursed Ham through cursing Canaan, that Canaan would be a slave to Shem and Japheth. And Shem's descendants are supposed to be the tent dwellers, and Japheth's descendants are supposed to be the Greeks. And you see how this is how the Bible was actually interpreted to justify that, with Ham's descendants being Egypt, put Cush, and of course Canaan, where Israel was established, that these lands were already predestinated to be given to other people. And these people, because they represent the lands of Africa, or what became Africa at that time, North Africa, they use this to justify and say that this is why we were supposed to have been enslaved, essentially. I mean, it blows your mind. A lot of people don't take the true rationale and context of what this really means when you realize that the Dum Diversas and these Papal Bulls, they were legal documents at that time, which gave authority to monarchs, because the King of Portugal, King Alphonse was the first, then eventually the Queen of Spain came into it, and then before long we start to hear that also the Queen of England too, and the slave ship Jesus, you see, is sent in, was it the 16th century, around that time. So you see that it was triggered because the church created the moral logic and the legal logic at that time for it in Europe. And then the invasion of people's lands ensued behind it. And a lot of people want to claim that they're woke, that they're conscious, but they want to practice Christianity. I want that point to really settle in, you see, because people will then want to separate the organization of the Roman Catholic Church from Christianity as a religion. But even if you wanted to get even into the Bible, there are parables where the archetype of Christianity, Jesus Christ, speaks about slave and bondservant relationships without any statement that they are negative and should be banished. All of these reveal that the Hebraic, Jewish, or Yehudi culture, which the Rabbi Yeshua or Jesus was a part of, because he wasn't a Christian. He didn't found any Christianity. He preached within a context of a culture which acknowledged that the Jews thought they were a chosen people. And in their code of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, they have regulations which give them the right through their God and preaching to enslave other nations which are not their own. This is the basis upon which slavery and white supremacy and this mentality of a chosen people from a God starts to evolve now and is used by the Roman Catholic Church through its imperial authority that was gained through the collapse of the Roman Empire, and allowed it to start to have this extension over the world and its temporal, called ecclesiastical influence. So it's deep. We want to talk of woke and conscious, my people. If you're not conscious of this, then you'll be making mistakes. You'll be making a lot of mistakes. You see it. Religion was used to promote the inferiority of the black man, as from the 15th century, when these Papal Bulls, Dum Diversas, Pontifex Romanus, Inter Cartera, all of these documents were written by these popes like Pope Alexander VI to justify and give a moral logic for the enslavement of dominant melanated people, black people. And I mean, they tried to enslave the Native Americans. That is, the indigenous nations of the lands that was called America after Amerigo Vespucci, to project and sustain racism via white supremacy, because the only way white supremacy can be sustained is if you actually convince a group of people that they are inferior to another. That's the way the whole system has been sustained. And when we're talking about wokeism, you see it, people who come to this realization that the world is fixed like this, they don't identify the sources of what created it to be like that. And that's why I'm complaining now that there's wokeism versus being consciousness, you see, because I understand that the word woke is a gimmick. You see, the media and entertainment industry is kind of flaring it up like, ha ha ha, you know, but you don't know. You're woke. And then people are adapting it like, I'm woke, thinking that they're actually claiming that they've come to a level of intellectual awareness, you see. And intellect means that you're capable of learning. That's what it means to be intelligent, that you have a higher capacity to learn. So everyone's intelligent. It's just that some people might not want to focus themselves as much as others. So you claiming that you woke, right? It means that you got up, you open your eyes, just like, what does it mean to be awake? You see, when we say someone's awake, awaken means that you've risen from sleep. You see it? And the verb form of awaken is awoke. So all they've done now is taken this, it's like they've taken this concept of an individual coming to awareness, which is what consciousness, being conscious, actually is about. You see, we knew that individuals were awakening into spiritual consciousness. That's actually what this whole process is, of realizing that this inward nature of what you see, touch, and feel, which is able to perceive reality, it's eternal and immortal, and it's embodied inside this flesh, but it's also a part of this universe outside of you here. And when you've come into awareness of that state of yourself, knowledge of self, actually, you now want to link up with other individuals who have also come to that realization, because that is the peculiarity of it. You've lived for some time not being able to express and experience this state of cosmic consciousness, and then when you do, you realize that it's a whole phenomenon on the face of this planet. And that is what things like the internet have exploded and brought people together in various communities to be able to share in this spiritual awakening. You go through stages of being awakened. You were sleeping, ignorant, unaware of these realities in society and these sources of injustice. There is an underlying reality and truth in the way that humanity is being manipulated on the face of this planet. And what we call the current system of existence, it's not actually natural, it's very artificial. And it's fabricated and created specifically by an institution on the face of this earth. And it's the same institution that initiated and created slavery. And we're talking about the Roman Catholic Church, which is why it's important for you to understand history and not just be woke. You see it? Because when you're conscious of the facts now, you've awakened and realized racism is there. It's perpetuating society. You now have to approach its source. That's what it means when you become conscious now. You're conscious of the source of a problem and you want to solve that problem. You see, that is the conflict that we're having now between this wokeism movement and the conscious community. If all of the conscious community activists or woke individuals or woke activists, or and I mean, I'm being very general, whether it's social media or how you get down with your each one teach one. You see it? If you realize that you actually want to tackle the source of racism, like I said, you've got to call out the organization that started it. And unfortunately, a lot of y'all, like I said, you're woke, so you're afraid to do it. Because you're not conscious. You see, if you were actually conscious, then you would see the necessitation of standing up and naming the organization. Those of us who have actually practiced with the arts of the craft, you realize that you can't identify any entity to banish it without calling it by its name. And there are all types of folklores where particular spirits that did not want themselves to be removed from a situation where they were committing havoc and maliciousness, they didn't want their name to be pronounced. So that's it, my people. We got to start speaking on Rome. And like I say, this is just the first part of this discussion. I'm going to take this into a part 2 so that I get into some real details that I didn't iron out as I was just flowing with this and building this foundation. But like I said, we got to challenge this wokeism and become consciousness so we can start mobilizing an organization. You see, we need to stop being reactionary. And I think that's the message I want to drop in this recording of the Minutes with the Minister, and that's where I'm going to be out, my people. Truthfully, I hope you got the message, and if you did get the message, make sure you share this video. Go down there, hit like, of course, share it to people, and subscribe to the channel because we'll be dropping more content. Peace. Profile.